Today we're talking about the fundamental human right and liberty to communicate. And Nico is going to talk to us about that. In short, it's, when an individual is not able to use speech alone to be understood or heard. And in these situations, it's really important that we both provide the fundamental right to be educated on how to communicate and then supported to communicate going forward. To this end, we're going to start with a short video that features Nico, and it'll show different individuals who use AAC, alternative and augmentative communication. And then we're going to move on to have Nico present to us. He answered questions on, what would he like us to know about, what is it like to be an individual who uses AAC, and how can we as a community help support people like Nico. And then we'll end with question and answer session where you can ask Nico questions, and assisted by his mom, he'll give us answers. I want to plant a seed, so I'm looking at, we have the Oregon State Bar chair of the diversity section in our room. But I want you to take our lead, follow our lead, and consider hiring Nico if you want to improve your workplace, improve your practice, improve your organization to be more accommodating and inclusive, and also to ensure that this fundamental human right to communicate is being honored. Also to that end, just a quick note that the Oregon State Bar Young Lawyers section, they heard about this when I was promoting this in my counties, and they're looking into doing another presentation about the right to communicate. So keep an ear open about that as well. Okay, and before we forget, OSB, again, nod to Amanda, we've provided lunches, so please take a lunch, and there's extra, because there's not 50 people in the room, so take extra.
On your way out.
Yeah, on your way out.
They're in that little conference room.
Yeah, they're in Judge Long's conference room, and please share it with a friend, and then tell them to watch Nico's video later. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Ashley Moheski. I am 31 years old. I use AAC because I was born with cerebral palsy and I don't have coherent speech. I use a GridPad 13 via eye gaze from SmartBox. As a licensed mental health therapist, it is essential that more research is conducted on mental health within the AAC community, as it is an overlooked topic that does not get research nearly enough. Mainly due to the belief that AAC users aren't intelligent enough to struggle with their mental health.
My name is Mike Hippel. I am living in Appleton, Wisconsin. I have cerebral palsy, so my throat and tongue does not work like everyone else does. I am using an Accent 1400 made by PRC with the program in Speak and Unity. We made some great way for studying things like reading and employment opportunities. But as the community, to my knowledge, we haven't really studying in the areas of education, math testing, and what they could be if they're in regular education all of the time. Include all types of people who use AAC, not just people like me who are great at using their device and have been around the community. We know how hard it is and what worked for us. Please let us help shape the future of our community so someone does not need to go through the same mistakes as we did.
My name is Francisco Pancho Ramirez. I live in Sonoma, California, in a nursing home. I suffered a car accident 21 years ago that led to a brainstem stroke, leaving me paralyzed and unable to speak. So I have to use an AUX device to communicate with people. I am using a speech-generating device from the Tobii Dynavox company and a head mouse. The mouse is called the Crozono. I can't communicate with anybody unless I am in my desk, close to my computer, or my AUX device. I could have my AUX mounted on my motorized wheelchair and bring it with me anywhere I go, but it is too bulky and blocks my visibility. I think researchers should include people with disabilities, people who need the help and are going to be the ones who use it at the end.
M, Y, my, N, A, M, E, my name, I, is, N, I, K, O, Nico, B, O, S, K, O, V, I, C. I, A, M, T, W, E, N, T, Y, T, W, O, I'm 22, Y, E, A, R, S. I have news for you, Nico, you're not 22, you're 23. Wait. Wait, what year were you born? 2001. Oh, no, you're gonna be 23 this year. I'm sorry. I get it mixed up.
Mama missed that.
I mixed it up.
I would like there to be more attention given to understanding why non-speakers are so marginalized in general, and how technoabilism is being used to silence people like me. I'd like to see future generations of non-speakers get appropriate resources as a matter of course instead of being tucked away in self-contained classrooms or left to find their own interventions like my parents were. I really hope research looks at quality of life issues. By that I mean quality indices that are informed by both standard scales of quality as well as those identified by autistic people. We aren't going to get an accurate picture of what a nurtured autistic life can hold if we aren't including autistic voices.
So the first question is, what is it truly like to be nonverbal? And by extension, what should we be doing better as a community to totally include, support, and incorporate our nonverbal neighbors? So can you give us an introduction and tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Presentation is starting.
History, and Oregon's amazing forests and coastal beaches. North Portland and split my time between my parents' houses. I graduated high school in 2019 with a regular diploma and am taking classes through Portland Community College to get my associate degree. That I would spend my life not being able to communicate anything more complicated than needing to use the bathroom or wanting a drink of water. Speech therapy was not a great experience and really frustrated me for making me say words which I simply couldn't pronounce. That I learned how to letterboard because my mom had gotten so tired of all the therapy and special diets she and my dad felt they needed to try. It was a point of contention with them, but because overseeing all of it fell on her shoulders, I imagine she really felt the weight of it. So, when she found out there was going to be a letterboard training in Seattle, she figured we could stay with relatives and eat on the cheap while attending the training. Me to being fully included in high school within 10 months, and it completely changed my life. But there was a lot of work along the way, and with every step, I got better at controlling my body and increasing my communication.
Okay. So the next question, right, Loretta?
Mm-hmm.
The next question is, what was it like before you learned to use AAC? What is the experience like for someone nonverbal who cannot communicate with others around them?
Rely on sharing stories from my childhood because I know that although there are many ways in which our autistic lives differ, there are numerous similarities. So I will state some details about myself so you can make your own conclusions. I was born in Portland, Oregon to parents who were newly married 1 year and felt a little unprepared. But they poured love into their care for me, and we lived happily for a while as I did a lot of the things that babies did on track. For example, rolling over, sitting up, and yes, talking and babbling. My father is Serbian and my mother is Lithuanian American, so each was speaking to me in their native language, and would speak to each other in English. Around 2.5, it started to become apparent that I was having trouble processing the world around me. I was feeling like everything was moving too fast and too loud, and I had to make it stop somehow. I was awake more hours and exposed to a constant stream of sensory information that penetrated my shell, making me exhausted and frustrated. I had no way of turning all that sensory input off. Turned all my attention to a handful of things I found soothing: rocking and jumping in place, being rolled up in stretchy fabrics and swinging back and forth, or playing in a big bin filled with beans that I would scoop and pour out in front of my eyes for hours. I focused on these activities because they made me feel better, as if the world had finally slowed down. No one around me understood why I did those things. They were upset that I was in my own world, uninterested in connecting with them on their terms. Why it had to be on their terms, I don't know, but I loved them and would do anything for them. Going to a preschool for disabled kids across town and being expected to follow new rules and tolerate new people, new smells, and lots of new sounds. It was in this new setting that I was introduced to a picture-based communication system. It consisted of little squares of paper on which there was a drawing of the word printed below. Each piece was laminated and had a piece of Velcro on the back so that it could be stuck to places around the room. I was expected to identify a card and take it to one of the classroom aides or the teacher to let them know I wanted something. Logistics about this communication system that seemed to make sense to adults and non-autistic people, but in my experience, it made no sense at all. The drawings were cartoonish and didn't correspond to the meanings I had for them. For example, the picture for store was a drawing of a simple storefront, but the grocery store I loved gave out red balloons to kids, and that's what I associated with the word. So, supposed to go over to my area where there was a schedule for the day laid out in a vertical column, select the activity we were about to start, stick it to a Velcro page next to that activity, and go about my business. Concepts like circle time and lining up to go home had no relevance to me, and I'm sure the staff were forever trying to teach me how the system worked. Courage to use it at home, so they brought home the papers and put them in a binder which I was encouraged to use. I was supposed to put the picture of whatever I was going to have for lunch in their palm as a way to ask. It felt even more foreign to do this at home than it was at preschool, and it must have to my mom too, because the pictures weren't ever really used after a few weeks. I spent 12 years unable to communicate my thoughts, wants, and needs. If I was scared, I had to show it in some way or else I was stuck trying to handle it on my own. If I was feeling tired or sick, no one noticed until I physically showed it by yawning or getting cranky. Were on my own for over a decade. Can any of you begin to understand how difficult that is to live with? So many times people said the most horrendous things about my intelligence in front of me as if I couldn't read their body language or see their contempt in the way their mouth sneered. That was the quickest way to find out which adults to trust. Been able to learn how to letterboard, my life and my personhood would look very different today. Having a way to communicate and people trained to support me changed my life. I was able to finish high school and start taking classes at the local college. I have a way to tell my mom what I want on my sandwich for lunch. I can tell my doctor when my anxiety medicine needs to be adjusted. I can answer excellent questions from people like you.
All right. So the next question, for those nonverbal individuals or those who cannot communicate solely by speaking, who do not get the chance to learn to communicate? Please describe for us what you thought about.
Saying I heard a lot in high school attributed to autistic people that I hate because they are not true. First, that all behavior is communication, and second, when you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. Both sayings are well-intentioned but obviously coined by non-autistics. What I dislike the most about the first saying is that it is simplistic and dismissive of the lived experiences of non-speakers. Imagine what it might be like to be unable to speak for a day. Throughout the course of your day, you experience the predictable ups and downs that most people have, getting stuck in traffic, feeling a headache coming on, seeing someone you like, or any other thing that affects your mood. Except you also have to navigate an environment that's confusing and often overstimulating, and you don't have a way to tell the important people in your life. Sometimes you are going to scream or jump around or throw something, and it doesn't mean anything at all except that life has you mad. Why don't more people make this connection? There are a lot of times when you might act in a way that is communicating a message, like my clothes don't feel right today or I can't stomach the texture of that overripe banana. We all do that to some degree. But there's a tendency to attribute special attention to the actions of those of us with quote-unquote severe disabilities. We are often described as being in our own world or being unreachable, unteachable, and unable to do most things that others take as natural gifts. We are literally depicted as puzzle pieces that struggle to fit. Autistics weren't invited to that narrative's creation. Maybe this doesn't seem like a big deal to some of you, but it sucks to see that symbol when I go places. The reason it offends me is how much parents defend it and take it on as an identity even though it has the vibe of the Confederate flag among most autistics. What it represents to someone like me is yet another level of mistrust and dismissal of autistic voices. Second saying, which is no doubt trying to emphasize the unique ways in which autistic people present to the world. Once you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism is not really the point. There are actually a lot of characteristics of non-speakers that we share. We are much smarter and have more desire for learning than anyone gives us credit for. Many of us are poets in the language we are raised in because ironically, words are the best way to describe the ways we experience the world. We share a love of nature and her messages to those of us whom she has taught to sing silently. Us are intellectually delayed, some who are marginalized by racism, homophobia, and poverty, some whose family situations further disable them through neglect and abuse like so many of their non-disabled peers. We are not unique or puzzle pieces but a population of autistics who experience our environments quite differently from most of you. We think about the same things other people do, albeit with our own perceptions. There is no magical thinking, although most of us have wonderful imaginations, and that's just it.
All right, so the next question. How did you and others perceive and interact with the world? Perceive and interact with the world and those in their life.
A different way of communicating is hard to do when the world around you doesn't think you can. In my experience, the search for communication was always focused on oral methods and was shaped, of course, by non-disabled professionals. The intervention we needed supposedly meant that we would speak someday, and it must have been frustrating for the SLPs I saw each week. The mid-2000s, the boom of awareness of non-speaking autistics was happening, and the narrative was driven by autism parents who were overwhelmed by a lack of services and support for raising a child with a pretty significant disability. The difficulties around health insurance, educational hopes, social relationships, and so many other factors led people to burnout and poor coping methods. All that tension got absorbed into the narrative about what it's like to be autistic and handed through a variety of filters that make it almost a caricature of our life experience. From the perspective of someone who has lived half his life without a way to communicate, I will share that life is a lot more introspective and interesting in its own right. You gain a lot of patience, and a sense of humor goes a long way when you can't speak reliably. It's an awful place to be because you can't make choices on your own. People, no matter how kind, always underestimate your intelligence and ignore your physical presence after a few minutes unless you behave in ways that are disruptive. Most people are uncomfortable when we find ways to calm down from an overstimulating situation because we can act unpredictably. But we often are hypersensitive to the people with whom we spend the most time, and it means that a majority of the time we are in a state of fight or flight. That can be a challenging existence for a family to live in and often leads to stress and misunderstandings of what actually is the issue. To emphasize that I had this exact situation happen in my family over and over again, and often their frustration with me or my behavior was missing the point that set me off. They couldn't know I wasn't feeling well until it was more obvious, like a raised temperature or a limp. Getting appropriate hands-on support was really only possible when I learned to letterboard.
Okay, the next question. Did you feel like you were an observer, or did you feel like you could interact in other ways?
Attitude in most societies that centers all that is verbal as the goal. Much like the deaf community and its conflicting views on accepting deafness as an identity or being able to hear to some degree with cochlear implants, there is an inherent bias towards being able to speak with one's mouth, and our family was no different. Therapists along the way, but it was futile to make my mouth form the sounds they required. The emphasis on communicating orally was strong throughout my childhood, but eventually, I was taken to a medical clinic where they could assess me to see what type of AAC might benefit me. One device was heavy like an encyclopedia and cost thousands of dollars. Another was like a little plastic box with all these pictures on it like those they used in preschool. There was a long wait to get a formal assessment, and I never did have one because the options were too impractical. And I think we settled into life. I attended an ABBA program in the mornings, and people came to my home to work with me in the afternoon. I would try to say what I needed, and the people around me understood most of those phrases. I could let them know when I couldn't reach something or I needed to use the bathroom. At the time, people decided everything for me, and I had to go along with it. If I protested, often I would get chastised for having behaviors, even though I was trying to communicate my needs. It was an incredibly stressful time of my life. There was the sense that I could be stuck in that limbo for the rest of my life. The alternative communication exploded with the launch of the iPad in 2010. Within a year, many people had one, including my family, and my sister, and I loved it. The games, the easy screen, and the way it seemed to make playing on it a family event. Remember, this was the early days of this amazing technology, and it wasn't that widespread, so when my sister would play on it, I was usually there alongside her. My parents downloaded a few alphabet games, and I loved their bright colors and sounds. It was one way I learned to spell and reinforced what I saw in the captions when my father watched the news on television. A number of communication apps over the years, and to be honest, none of them feels natural to me yet. I am learning to keyboard so I'm not reliant on anyone else to communicate. I don't expect to ever be able to speak with my mouth to communicate, but the world is changing, and there might be technology that makes this a reality someday. There is all sorts of scientific research happening that's exploring the way the brain makes language. Individuals like me have had their brains scanned and with the help of artificial intelligence had word patterns replicated so that their natural voice can be used. There is so much exciting potential in AI for disabled people, and I truly believe there will continue to be more and more opportunities for non-speakers to communicate in the next 5 years. Misconception that AAC hinders language development. I would like to share that using a letterboard is freeing for me. It means I have authority and consent over my life. I don't dwell on the fact that I can't make my mouth form the right sounds because I have this whole other way of telling my story. Maybe it's different and slow, but I will keep pointing my way as long as there are people who are open to listening.
Great. So did you have a sense that you were different and needed something else in order to bridge the gap to those around you?
Around age 3, I thought I was like one of those monkeys I saw at the zoo. They were chittering to each other, and there was a general sense of a threat in the air. I could feel it too, although I didn't yet have the vocabulary to name what I felt. The people I was with didn't seem to sense the vibe and were engaged in their own observations about the monkeys which I didn't even listen to. I think that whatever was spooking them moved away, and my stroller was pushed to another exhibit. On a very distant level, I knew I could feel the monkeys' anxiety for some reason, and I knew that no one else did. Word to my kindergarten class. I am 5 and in a basement classroom that is huge and filled with the din of nearly 60 children split into 2 classes. There aren't any walls to separate the 2 groups, only furniture that's been arranged creatively to make the space work. The teacher resents my presence and says terrible things about my mom and my abilities in front of me. Other kids aren't bad, and I get invited to a birthday party which I go to. For a long time, the school didn't put an aide with me but had me supported by another student's para-educator, but she wasn't able to support me on worksheets when she was helping the other person use the bathroom. I think this was when the teacher was especially put out by my presence because it added more to her plate. An airport in Germany, I think. We are traveling from my father's home in Serbia to Portland. As many young kids do, I have a great love of the window seat and can sit transfixed by the wonderful sensory input flying provides for hours. My parents arranged for the right seats, but as airlines sometimes make mistakes, the seats were lost. Was up to talk to the counter agent. She comes back 5 minutes later and is upset to the point of shaky tears, explaining that the agent, upon hearing that I was autistic and really flew well if I sat by a window, asked if my behavior would prevent me from flying calmly. She told my mom that if we couldn't accept whatever seat she gave me, she would prevent us from boarding and flag us as disruptive. We took the seats, of course, but the hot anger and humiliation I could feel for the entire flight. Oldest client in an ABO program by 5 years. The staff are nice, but their methodology is all about compliance and fitting into normal society. I can letterboard a little, but they won't use it because it's not valid in their eyes. I am working instead on recognizing the alphabet. More than I fit in. I am the most autistic person my mom has ever met. There is something to be said about wearing that badge and not being able to defend it. The thing is, once I had a way to communicate to others, that label of being so autistic that no one else shared my space was gone. It was disproved as soon as I started high school. The moment I was accepted by my classmates was the day I gave a presentation about what it was like to be autistic. There must have been something I shared that resonated, because from that point on, I had better social connections and felt like part of the school community. I am autistic and know that I interact with the world around me differently from everyone around me, but it's all I can do on my own. Mainly, it's society that makes me feel different. People aren't always kind and they are more impatient than not. When someone is disabled, there is a perception that the less they can independently communicate, the less they have to say. I call bullshit and counter with the reality of being someone who is non-speaking. I just happened to get very lucky and was able to learn to letterboard. I was accepted for myself and made to feel like people were cool with who I was. I was asked my thoughts and opinions on decisions affecting my life. I don't act like a neurotypical person, and I'm pretty okay with that. The world around me is finally starting to make room for those of us who have high support needs and use AAC. That's the best scenario I could have hoped for.
All right, next question. Did you wish others would do something different or more to communicate with you the way you needed to communicate?
More accurate to say that I have had to adopt coping strategies to deal with everyday ableism and autism discrimination. That is to say, like any minority group in America, disabled people have to navigate a landscape that may be unwelcoming or sets out to keep us a few rungs down the societal ladder in order to keep others in power. Some of us have to find coping methods that protect us from racism or homophobia in addition to ableism. It's a lot to take in, especially when you're battling institutionalized discrimination. A skill that few of us, regardless of disability status, are taught. Instead, we simply hone it over and over until a core reaction is formed and we find relief, or at the very least, homeostasis. There are many ways disabled people choose to cope, so I just want to be clear that this is coming from a white male who has the ability to live at home and is supported by paid staff for most of the day. Frustrated from not understanding a social rule or someone treats me like I am a child, I feel my anxiety rise like a flag up a pole. It manifests as me getting more repeaty as I feel more overwhelmed. These are not pleasant symptoms of anxiety, and often the people around me have a hard time keeping calm because they are getting triggered by my coping method. In turn, my anxiety gets worse because I know I'm causing others discomfort. It's one of our realities and a rather negative situation that my autism provokes. Sometimes my autistic behaviors are really challenging to the people around me. I am not going to be offended by someone having a problem with something I do, but let me say this, when someone who is autistic is behaving in a way that bothers you, it's most likely that they are coping with some sort of sensory challenge in their environment. Our ability to handle our environment is compromised by how much more of it we notice compared to non-autistic people. It means a noise that you might not notice is really annoying to me. The completely overwhelmed toddler I was couldn't handle or process my environment, so I retreated internally. I was so overwhelmed, but there were a few things I found which helped me feel grounded. My parents. They were my tether to what felt safe. To this day, I love snuggling with either one of them because their odors haven't changed since I was a baby. I think they are the most important people I will have, until I find a girlfriend, that is. They provide so much comfort as well as challenges to make me be more flexible and okay with change. Be coping methods for each other when one acts as a cultural translator for situations that are triggering or confusing. I've seen my parents do this for me all the time when I was little and had poor impulse control. Sometimes another person can intervene on my behalf and quietly explain that I am autistic to whoever is getting wigged out by my behavior, and often this helps me cope better because usually they respond with compassion and it diffuses the situation. The method of coping I have found is writing poetry. It puts everything on the page for a reader to experience, but the added benefit is that this person will read it through their lens of personal experience and find things in common with me, which they never do if I am stimming or repeating out of anxiety. I am as foreign to them as if I dropped out of the sky from a spaceship in those moments. I read one of my poems, There is delight, there is sadness felt which I too, have felt, there might be a commingling of their own memories with what I shared, there is equity given where before there was pity, derision, or ill will towards me. It humanizes me to non-autistic people, and when that group includes parents, it can only help their autistic children be seen as capable of art and beauty. We deserve to be seen in this light.
Okay, the next question. What were your primary needs and wants at that time, if you can generalize such a thing?
Question, and I will say this, my primary needs were and continue to be the same as any person my age. Not having reliable communication is a landscape few people can imagine. There's really no way to describe the frustration of having so much to share and only having limited times to write. I read about a literary journal that released an issue which included an editor's note about not making any edits to the submitted works. This is because the contributors, all autistic non-speakers, often only had one writing session per week, so they did all their revisions in their heads. Most autistic non-speakers write this way. I do this as naturally as breathing because my mind is my creative space. It is where I retreat when I get overwhelmed. I store away thoughts which will become a poem or make its way into something I write about. My least worry is not speaking like other people, it's that they won't even attempt to include me in decisions that impact me, that they won't try to find a way for me to communicate.
I think we're now opening it up to questions and answers. So if anyone has a question for Nico.
So many questions, it's hard to know where to begin.
And also people in the chat on WebEx, you can ask questions. We have Christina watching the chat.
I don't have any questions, but Joe Brinkman says, thank you for sharing articulate and thoughtful responses to the questions. I appreciate all that you have done to communicate your experiences, and I value what you have to say.
Do you have something to say? Okay.
Mama Lalapa.
Little I W A N T I want T O 2 B E I want to be O P E I want to be open T O 2 A N Y A N T or A N Y Any U E S T I O and I want to be open to any questions. Y O U M A you may H A D makes more sense. I want to be open to any questions you have.
I will say, as someone who is also autistic, but obviously not having as many communication issues since I am speaking, I really appreciate what you shared because a lot of it really resonated with me in terms of the sensory overload and all of those things. And I noticed prior to this starting that it does seem that there is some verbal communication with your mother because she does seem to understand some of what you say. And so I was curious how much, if a person spends enough time with you, how much they can learn to understand, even if it's not the words that we're expecting to hear in normal, in everyday society.
Ready? Y
Mama Lalapa.
letter bird O U A S K you ask A G R E A you ask a great you E you ask a great question A N D and I W O U L and I would D E S C R I and I would describe M Y S E L and I would describe myself A as M I N I M A L L and I would describe myself as check mark. Did you want to tell them or you want to ask? Y E S I H A V E I have A C O U P L E I have a couple P O E M S poems I D I'd L I K E I'd like T O 2 F I N I S but I'd like to finish W I I have a couple of poems I'd like to finish with. Is that okay?
Please.
Okay.
That was going to be one of my questions, but I didn't want to take over everyone else's.
Okay. Okay. Let's see how it goes, Nico.
Says moron.
Okay, I'm going to read it because I don't want it to skip. Ode to the way she says moron. History has tied me to you, baby sister to my status as your only living brother. You fire off words that would melt paint off the walls in their heat of hatred towards my faults. I could aim a cannon with precision, using your death stare at a bird from 20 paces and drop him bloodlessly from fright. Knowing you despise me as much as I admire you makes us the most unique coin. My side smelting a growing sense of pride in how far I've come, despite what the so-called experts had prognosed. Your side counterbalanced with a jealous resistance, using my hard-won habits as a measure of what I can't do, instead of giving me an iota of credit due. In Germany, in a hotel, after 12 hours of flight, you plaintively meow about my being tired, too tired, in fact, to relax in a strange room, in a foreign place, going on full offensive, sneering, quote, "You moron, have some respect for those of us who need to rest." For every time I make myself calm through mutterings, for all the times I ducked into your room looking for a clue on what made you so animus towards my being, for each repeat I try to make you say, there is but one response from your side, moron. I take your venom and I carry it in a space next to my heart, filled with cushions to soundproof the interior, so that moron can't creep into the place where I hold you dear. I'll spin your poison in a centrifuge someday, separate what fevered pitch of regret may exist among the daily taunts, and find a way to make you understand the simplest way to make change from our shared purse. Let's give our account a new currency as foreign to our coin as that cannon to the bird, and we'll decide how we'll spend it. If giving it away works for you, I'll write a check and give you my share. Just know that the price you pay is no more, moron. We'll do one more that is a little bit more positive. A forest song sings best as a duet. We are not so different, you and me, for our roots grow deep and thick, nurtured by sweet-smelling Oregon firs that drop their needles into our waiting palms. Our leaves spread through canopies that weave a quiet sleeve of green and poke through your memories of being young and in awe of the mountains. We are not different at all, you see, for I am you and you are me. Make a path through the trees and follow it down to the place where we'll meet tomorrow. Have your heart ready. Long will we wander among the wild bees and young meadow flowers until our hair is matted down with sap. I'll comb out the amber and string it around your wrist that holds the needles that prick my heart into a tattoo of us.
Thank you. So we're at time, but thank you everyone for
I
joining
do have
us.
a comment I would like to read.
Oh yeah, go ahead, please.
Thank you for speaking with us today and helping us learn. I saw you in person at the Oregon Resource Association Conference, I believe in 2019. Your story has stayed with me ever since, and I have enjoyed sharing it with my staff. I work in an organization that supports individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I have followed you on social media and have celebrated as you graduated high school, worked your job, wrote your poetry, and attended college. Thank you for being so open and sharing with us.
Thank you.
And I think that's Mr. Danny from Coos Bay. Is that correct?
Presentation?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. So, and just so Nico and his mom knows, we have a representation around the state. Danny's from Coos Bay. We also have, earlier I saw a supervisor from the Clatsop County Courthouse. We have board members from Multnomah County, and then folks here in the courtroom as well. So thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. This is amazing. And everyone, again, I encourage you, just like the Oregon State Bar, if you want to increase your workplace equity, consider hiring Nico like we did. He's a great trainer, an amazing poet. very brilliant young man. So do that, and then also take food. There's
Please
lots
take
of food
food.
at the Oregon State Farm. Yes, and then Amanda.
I have one more comment for you.
Yeah, oh yes, yeah.
I think there's a sheet.
And this is from
Yes.
Monica Pyle. She says the presentation has been the most interesting. I was an early childhood educator who has used picture schedule. However overwhelming for you, the presentation would be nice or would be helpful to all educators and special educators. Thank you.
Yeah, and Miss Monica used to be the executive director of Head Start in Tillamook.
Oh, wow.
So we have representation from Tillamook. Yeah, we did apply for CLE credit, so any lawyers in the room, please sign this. And then any lawyers or judges on virtual, we have applied for CLE credit. The materials are in the link that Ms. Christina posted in the chat box. So that counts towards the CLE materials. We also have some handouts here. And then for people in the room, if anyone wants to sign the thank you card for Nico, there's a card floating around. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.